Greetings and salutations. Today we will be covering the Setagaya family tragedy. In the depths of the Kamisoshigaya neighborhood in Setagaya, Tokyo, a chilling tale took place as the winter night unfolded. It was on the cusp of December 30th, 2000 that the Miyazawa family found themselves entrenched in a nightmarish ordeal that would leave a black mark in Tokyo's history, creating one of the most frustrating unsolved cases as the tapestry of tragedy cast its shadow on that very day. Mikio Miyazawa, a pillar of strength at 44 years old, stood alongside his wife Yasuko, a woman of grace and poise, aged 41, along with their innocent daughter Nina, merely 8 years old, and their youngest, Rei, aged at just 6 years old. And sadly, this family would go through an ordeal which they could not come back from, as the night became entrenched in a malevolence that breached the sanctuaries of their homes. The minutes stretched into hours as an unknown malefactor perpetrated a horrific home invasion that would etch itself into the collective memories of the entirety of Tokyo. The sinister intruder, whose identity even today is shrouded in darkness, committed an unbelievably heinous act upon this innocent family. However, after committing said act, the tale took an eerie turn when, instead of fleeing into the night, the intruder remained, leaving his macabre mark. It was as if the fiend sought to savor the aftermath of his atrocious deeds. The aftermath painted a harrowing picture, a canvas splattered with blood that would never fully dry, as this fiend had slaked his malevolent thirsts for violence and carnage. The Japanese police would embark on an arduous journey in an attempt to unveil the malefactor's identity. Clues would emerge from the depths of the tragedy, and the labyrinth would lead a winding trail which included fingerprints and DNA that would etch its haunting signature across this confounding case. As the seasons turned into years, the haunting truth remained unsolved. The murders of the Miyazawa family would leave a legacy of grief that would endure, while the 30th of December 2000 may have faded into the sands of time. The echoes of this crime still reverberate through the neighborhoods of Setagaya as Mikiko, Yasuko, and their 2 children had their lives ruthlessly stolen by an unknown perpetrator. Starting with the setting of the crime, the Miyazawa abode. It was a semi-detached house where the building shared walls with another, meaning 2 families are linked in this building's history. And while the houses were interconnected, they shared no internal passage between the homes. To traverse from one threshold to the other, one would have to step outside and re-enter through the front door. This was a somewhat subtle yet telling detail which hinted at the unique dynamics of this shared space. The landscape that cradled this dwelling seemed to hold its own secrets. A park stood sentinel behind their home, and it must be noted that the skate park in particular was undergoing a transformation during the fateful hours when this crime took place. A once vibrant community dwindled over 200 households, whittling down to a mere 4, was a testament to the impending metamorphosis. Within this shrinking enclave, the Miyazawa family, along with Yasuko's kin, in particular her mother Haruko, along with her sister and brother-in-law, lived next door, and they shared in the twilight days of a neighborhood undergoing a major change. The Miyazawa house and its neighboring skate park stood juxtaposed due to a fence separating them, regardless of the proximity. While it may not appear as such, both families lived under rather cramped conditions, planning to eventually move out once they sold their home to the city. Unfortunately, this house would be where they would spend their final hours. For the sake of simplicity, we will be going over things in a chronological order. December 25th, the year 2000. In the tranquil embrace of the Kamisoshigaya neighborhood, a chilling enigma stirred. This was due to, on the 25th of December 2000, Yasuko Miyazawa, a member of the titular family, would confide in her father-in-law about a rather peculiar occurrence that had cast an unsettling shadow over their lives. For several consecutive days, an ominous car had taken residence outside their abode. Its presence haunting the front of their residence like a specter or a predator just waiting to pounce. The air was thick with unease, for this was no ordinary parking behavior. As the perplexing tableau unfolded, it became apparent that there was an abundance of available parking that had been ignored, rendering this peculiar choice inexplicable. If the intention was to access the park nestled behind the Miyazawa house, alternative parking spots lay readily available, eliminating the need for the visitor to clamber over the fence. This was a strange puzzle piece that refused to fit seamlessly into the narrative of a normal neighborhood where nothing could go wrong. December 27th would be the date that a pivotal piece of the puzzle would emerge. The watchful eye of an individual noticed a man who seemed rather out of place making his presence known around the premises of the Miyazawa residence. Said bystander would become one of the few to observe this figure. They would note that the individual's age seemed to be around the 40s, maybe the late 30s, yet the man's presence remained merely that of a fleeting silhouette, making their way around the neighborhood, but particularly around the Miyazawa residence. It seemed rather strange for this figure to be making their way around the house, yet not directing themselves to the verdant park near the family's dwelling. As such, his appearance was rather uncommon. However, at the time, this incident bore little to no mark of suspicion, as the details seemed rather insignificant. However, once combined with the unsettling presence of the parked car and the later crimes that would occur, a chilling narrative would take place. Had this witness sighted the killer who slew the Miyazawa family, or had they just taken an interest in someone who was out of place at the time? December 29th was when witnesses spotted a man within the corridors of the Seiju Ogokuemae station. Said individual was supposedly dressed in a similar manner to many of the skaters who were known to frequent the park. However, a singular observation from a perceptive bystander held some rather important information. Said figure was dressed in an attire which was completely incongruent with the prevailing weather. The man's skater-like clothing was deemed inappropriate for the season, and he was also noted, much later though, to share a similarity with a man spotted near the Miyazawa house. Eyewitnesses spotted him purchasing a sashimi knife, and while his attire would match that which was later discovered to belong to the perpetrator of the slayings, little note was paid to his actual identity at the time. December 30th. As the curtains drew closed on the year 2000, the labyrinthian tale of the Miyazawa family truly descended into an abyss of misfortune and despair. 6 p.m., the Miyazawa family embarked on a seemingly ordinary evening of shopping, leaving behind their residence, which would soon transform from a dwelling where they shared happy memories to the den of nightmarish horrors in which their lives would be taken. The question of whether the quartet departed together or if some of them remained within the walls of their abode remains to this day a tantalizing unanswered mystery. At 7 p.m., within the confines of the family home, Yasuko's voice bridged the gap between the houses as she conversed with her mother next door. The quaint interactions concealed the weight of foreboding, for as dusk settled, 8-year-old Nina crossed the threshold into her grandmother's haven. There, in the embrace of familial warmth, she sought the solace of a recorded program, blissfully unaware that this would be the last time she would spend with her grandmother. At 10 p.m., the tranquil night betrayed its calm facade, as a witness account stated that as they traveled along the path that wound behind the Miyazawa abode, they stated they heard echoes of raised voices and an argument seeping through the walls, which punctuated the night's stillness. However, they did note that they did not hear any blood-curdling screams or any resounding bangs, which would point to a struggle, only an unsettling crescendo of discord. 10:38 p.m. Records show that Mikio Miyazawa was looking through his email just prior to the dark turn of events. 11 p.m. Witnesses next door or witness to an unanticipated disruption. They heard a loud bang resonating through the night, a cacophonous testament to the unraveling macabre narrative within the neighboring abode. This would be believed by many to be the moment of the family's youngest being victimized, as he was strangled to death. However, the following cacophony is believed to involve the perpetrator turning their sights on Mikiko, Yusako, and Nina, as each were struck multiple times with a sharp blade. To go into further detail, the killer entered through the open window of the second-floor bathroom, which pointed directly at the park behind the house. It was noted that the killer gained access by climbing the tree that was next to the window. Then, using their bare hands, the killer strangled Ray, who was sleeping on the second floor. Then, upon hearing the noise, the patriarch of the family rushed up the stairs and an ensuing scuffle commenced, where Mikio injured the killer. However, he was stabbed through the head with the killer's weapon, a sashimi knife. The knife's blade would break off inside his head, and the killer would then attack Yusako and Nina using the broken remains of a knife, until he was able to get his hands on another knife from the family's own home. The killer would then essentially enjoy himself watching visual over the house for the next 2 to 10 hours, leaving fingerprints, footprints, clothing, and even fecal matter within the house, all the while consuming the food and drink of the family. Amidst the aftermath of this devastation, the killer would leave a chilling trail of breadcrumbs, each morsel painting a vivid portrait of the enigma that had woven its tendrils around the Miyazawa household. The shamelessness of this killer would be plastered all around the crime scene, as he would be noted as having eaten their ice cream and melon, along with drinking the family's barley tea, and even taking a nap in the house itself, showing just how comfortable he was with the inhuman actions he had perpetrated upon the family. Authorities would note that the first floor held a cache of documents which were spread out following the path the killer took, apparently throwing the documents as he proceeded to ascend the staircase to the upper echelons of the dwelling. Once entering one of the bedrooms, he seemed to scatter the remains across, as if to further blur the lines between humanity and monstrosity. The room bore another facet to the killer's intrusion. This is where he would relieve himself. Said leavings did give investigators a rather useful clue. Apparently, the perpetrator had recently consumed string beans and sesame seeds. However, aside from that, little else was gained from their leavings. It would seem that the killer could not help himself once finding that he was in a home with access to the internet, because at 1:18 a.m., the patriarch Mikiko's digital presence would once more burst into existence. In a police report, which was revealed in 2014, it was shown that the 10 a.m. connection, once attributed to the malefactor, now found its origin in an accidental trigger. However, the 1:18 a.m. connection was undoubtedly made by the killer himself. Within the fleeting time that he used the internet, it would seem that he would browse the bookmarks that the family's patriarch had left on the computer, and that they had attempted to purchase tickets. Yet amidst all this, the most intriguing factor was the general absence of proper keyboard interaction. The interactions noted by the police were confirmed to be done through mouse clicks, leaving a question lingering in the air. Was this a sign of an unfamiliarity with Japanese script, potentially keying in that the killer's origins lay beyond the bounds of the nation he had committed the atrocity in? Investigators would later discover the importance of the garments, which were discarded within the Miyazawa household, as they would be a major piece in the puzzle. The clothing spoke volumes. Said clothing resembled those of the individual who had been sighted in the area. The garments also bore the presence of a particular hard water, which bore a signature that was beyond that of Japan's borders. However, the enigma deepened further, as the malefactor's identity could be linked to traces of sand, which were identified as being from the Great Basin Desert, specifically that of sand from within Edwards Air Force Base in Kern County, California. As bewildering as this was, it could potentially help narrow down the list of suspects. There was also the handkerchief left behind. The handkerchief apparently had been ironed prior to its use by the killer, decreasing the chances that this was a homeless person actively committing a crime of opportunity. However, as the investigation delved further, a sweater worn by the killer showed its rather unique signature, being one of only 130 that had been made. The garments left behind painted a rather vivid picture of an apparent globetrotter. In the home, there was also the evidence left thanks to the scuffle. Bandages, towels, and sanitary towels bore traces of type A blood, and further still, once analyzing the DNA, another revelation awaited authorities, one that painted a complex tapestry of heritage. Maternal DNA showed a distinct European lineage. Converging with paternal DNA, a testament of East Asian descent, showed that the killer was a blend of two worlds. Amongst the blood trail emerged fingerprints. However, it seems that none of the prints matched within the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department's database. And it also would seem that since this crime, the perpetrator has not committed such an act since. With the evidence gathered, police were able to build a profile of the perpetrator. Said perpetrator would have a slim build and measure 170 centimeters tall, or 5'6", bordering on 5'7". The wounds on the victims indicate that the perpetrator was likely right-handed, and the DNA proved that he was definitively a male. They were also able to estimate that he was between 15 and 35 years old at the time of the incident, due to the physicality that was required for entering the household. One potential theory surrounding who the perpetrator might have been lies with the skater theory. The fact that the clothing left behind was one that mirrored those embraced by skaters in the early 2000s within Japan's borders, potentially showed a glimpse into this individual's persona, one which, in Japan, was bordering on the edges of society. A shadowy series of rumors adds depth into the theory, one where information that points to Mikio Miyazawa himself having crossed paths with a group of skaters days preceding the tragedy could point to a conflict having escalated and led to the deaths of the family. That and the closeness to the skate park. Amongst the details, these shoes worn by the malefactor were a choice which at the time was incongruent with typical skater attire. That, along with the links to the American Air Force Base, seemed to increase the complexity of the case. Further still, in the tapestry, which is the Miyazawa mystery, threads of intrigue and enigma are woven from bloodstains to whispered theories, each a piece of the puzzle which offers a tantalizing glimpse into a truth that easily eludes our grasp. The echo of footsteps in the corridors, the sudden scuffle which left behind DNA evidence, inked a case where, even with an overabundance of evidence, investigators were unable to navigate the labyrinth of theories to reach a conclusion, and unfortunately, the answers may remain cloaked in darkness. If you remained with me until the end, I thank you, and I do hope you stay tuned and subscribe for more content.